Welcome to the meeting of the Extended Planning Applications Committee. My name is Councillor Cunningham and I am the Chair of the committee. Before we begin, I would just like to make everyone aware that the meeting will be shown live on the internet. It will also be stored in the Council's webcam archives and will be available for viewing at a later date. I have the discretion to suspend or stop filming if, in my opinion, allowing filming to be continued would affect the proceedings of this meeting. Can I remind you that the microphones must be switched on before you start to speak and switched off immediately after. Do you hear that?
Did I hear that? I did. Oh, sorry.
Good.
Yes, I did hear that.
Thank you very much. Not that I'm making any accusation. Right, so we've got the page. Yeah, you go now.
So I'm just going to introduce the members and staff that are present here today at committee. So in the chamber today we've got Councillor Caroline Bamforth. Councillor Buchanan is joining remotely. Councillor Campbell is in the chamber. Councillor Convery is joining remotely. Councillor Edlin's in the chamber. Councillor Ireland's in the chamber. Councillor Lundy's in the chamber. Councillor MacDonald is joining remotely. Councillor McLean, Vice Chair, is in the chamber. Councillor Merrick is joining remotely. Councillor Morrison is in the chamber. Councillor O'Donnell is joining remotely. Councillor Pragnell and Councillor Gordon Wallace are in the chamber. And I'll just introduce the officers that are supporting the meeting today. We have Gillian McCartney, who's Head of Environment, Chief Planning Officer, in the chamber. Julie Nicholl, Planning and Building Standards Manager, in the chamber. Alan Pepler, Principal Planner, Development Management, in the chamber. Richard Greenwood, Principal Strategy Officer for the Local Development Plan Lead, and he's joining remotely. We have Karen Benny, Principal Strategy Officer, Affordable Housing and Development Contributions Lead, joining remotely. Siobhan Wilson, Solicitor, in the chamber. Eamon Daly, Democratic Services Manager, in the chamber. Myself, Clerk to the committee, in the chamber. And Leona Allison, Assistant Committee Services Officer, who's joining in the chamber. We also have consultees available for any questions today, and that is Margaret Phelps from East Renfrewshire HSCP, who's joining remotely, and Louisa Hum from Historic Environment Scotland, joining remotely. For apologies today, these have been received from Provost Montague, Councillor Devlin. Can I just take any declarations of interest? No? And I'll just hand back to the Chair now. Thank you.
Sorry about that. Agenda item 3, application for consideration by the committee. There are 2 applications for the committee to consider today, both related to the same development. 2021-0298-TP, application for planning permission, and 2021-0334/LBC, application for the listed building consent. So this is the one that's wrong. Right, you ready? Right, you do that bit, okay?
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, members. There are 2 applications before you this afternoon, 1 planning application and 1 application for listed building consent. I can run through the description. It's the restoration, alteration and conversion of Caldwell House to form assisted living flats and ancillary facilities, which are Class 8. Restoration and alteration of the former Keeper's House to form dwelling, which is Class 9. Construction of a care home, Class 8. Construction of new build assisted living flats, which is Class 8, and dwellings, Class 9. Selective demolitions of existing buildings and associated landscaping, infrastructure and engineering works, including the upgrade of existing site access roads and path network. The presentations which will follow will consider aspects of both applications. This is a major development and is significantly contrary to policy. In cases such as this, the legislation requires that a predetermination hearing be held. There is one public objection. Planning applications have to be determined in accordance with the development plan unless material considerations indicate otherwise. It's not often that a proposal of this nature is considered by a Planning Applications Committee. It is a unique and complex proposal, and every effort has been made to present a balanced assessment in the reports of handling. I would highlight that there are a number of areas where the proposals are considered to be significantly contrary to the development plan policy, and any new build development at this location would be unacceptable without the full restoration of the Caldwell House and the Keeper's House. Objections have been received from Scottish Forestry, the Woodlands Trust and the Health and Social Care Partnership, and the reasons for these are set out in the reports. You will also note that the Planning Authority considers the most significant factor in the determination to be the restoration of the Grade A listed building, and Historic Environment Scotland has offered its support for the repair, conservation and reinstatement of this. In terms of how this will be achieved, the applicant is proposing enabling development to fund the restoration. Enabling development has a very specific purpose, and it allows development to take place which would normally be contrary to planning policies in order to obtain a desired objective such as the reuse of an historic asset. The reports of handling assess this approach and the fact that special regard must be had to the desirability of preserving the building or its setting or any features of special architectural or historic interest which it possesses. This is considered alongside other relevant policies and material considerations and highlights where concerns and risks lie before reaching an on-balance recommendation for the committee. I'll pass over to Alan Pepler, the Principal Development Management Planning Officer, who will present the applications to you.
Thanks, Julie. I'm just going to share some slides. Okay, thanks, Julie. The committee paper set out firstly the planning policy background, followed by information on the architectural importance of Caldwell House, the economic information associated with the proposal and enabling development considerations. In respect of the enabling development justification, the Planning Service has assessed and sought independent advice from the District Valuer on the financial elements presented by the applicant, as set out in pages 18 to 20 of the report. The conclusion was that the applicant has demonstrated that the minimum development necessary to restore a listed Caldwell House is proposed and that the proposal is viable, albeit only marginally so. However, the scale of the proposed enabling development and environmental impacts are recognised as being significant, and an assessment of these impacts is set out from page 22 of the papers. These are listed under broad categories as sustainability of the proposals, impact on trees and biodiversity, visual and landscape impact, placemaking, design and amenity, housing needs and health and economic impacts. I have some slides to help illustrate some of the key land use issues and provide some details of the development proposed. This image shows the area around Caldwell House. The key features are the location of the house in this area, the existing routes through the site, the central area of open space, and the tree groupings within and surrounding the site. The site access is from Gleniffer Road, to the west, and Rowden's Cottage is located in this area here, just off the main access road. That's one of two adjacent neighbours. These are recent images of Caldwell House. As you can see, it is derelict with no roof, windows or doors, with internal floors also severely damaged. The more modern additions to be demolished are visible at either end, especially on the right-hand side here. This image shows the building from the opposite side. Some of the original design features at the top of the walls are still clearly visible. These images show the condition of the B-listed Keeper's House, which also is in a derelict state. These images show the landscape of the estate. The area around Caldwell House is severely overgrown in places. The nature of the access roads through the site are also illustrated, as is the central area, which is largely open and at a lower level than surrounding areas. That's the bottom image of these four. This drawing shows the proposed scheme proposed by the applicant for... These drawings show the proposed restoration works to Caldwell House, including the proposed modern bungalows either side of the building. I won't comment on these in detail. The restored building will align as closely as possible with the original architectural drawings of Robert Adam, as stated in the report, and the proposals are supported in principle by Historic Environment Scotland. I'll just quickly go through the rest of these. This drawing shows the proposed scheme proposed by the applicant for a retirement village to provide funds to restore Caldwell House. The proposal is to be built in zones, taking account of the existing elements within the site, in particular the existing access routes and areas of more biodiverse trees and landscape. Caldwell House is located here. Keeper's House is in this location. The care home is this block here. The assisted living blocks are these ones, and the remaining buildings you can see are the proposed bungalows. There are also proposed walking routes through woodland areas and other habitats totalling around 5 kilometres. This drawing shows the different types of woodland on the site at present. The darker green areas show conifer woodland and the lighter green broadleaf woodland, with hatched areas mixed. The top drawing shows the areas designated as ancient woodland. It's difficult to see. It's hatched, but it covers quite a substantial proportion of the site. The red areas of ancient woodland are to be removed to make way for the development, and these areas are identified in particular by the Woodlands Trust and Scottish Forestry as areas of significant concern because they are proposed to be removed for development. The plan also shows the areas of compensatory planting in dark green, and is noted that a further 2 hectares of compensatory planting is proposed off-site. It is noted that the applicant has surveyed the trees on site and has argued that the ancient woodland status does not adequately reflect the situation on the ground and the history of woodland planting and removal at the site. It is noted that the applicant is proposing planting of broadleaf species to replace some areas of conifer plantation, which may improve biodiversity in the long term, albeit in the short term there is concern in relation to climate change impacts. An analysis of the tree impacts is set out in pages 24 to 26 of the report. The bottom plan shows the proposed landscaping proposal submitted by the applicant, which includes areas of compensatory planting and open space, as well as walking routes around the site. So you probably can't see that one very well. The final slides provide elevation drawings of the other proposed buildings within the site. These are firstly the bungalows, single-storey building at the top there, the assisted living units, which are 3-storey, and the care home, which is 2-storey. There are other issues covered in the assessment, in particular in relation to sustainability and impacts associated with the care home, as commented on by the Health and Social Care Partnership. These are set out in the relevant sections of the report, as are other development management considerations and responses to the objection and consultee comments. The overall conclusions on pages 32 and 32 bring together the arguments and the way applied to policies and other material considerations. Concern over the sustainability of the proposed retirement village is noted, especially in relation to the lack of comprehensive services and facilities available to serve residents and the associated reliance on private car travel. It is recognised that a bus service is proposed, although it is noted that there is no guarantee that this would be a viable service in the long term. Due to the proposed phasing, it is also recognised that there is an element of risk due to changing economic conditions that the proposed restoration would not be completed as planned. Visual impacts, loss of trees designated as ancient woodland, and associated climate change impacts are also noted. The positive economic and health impacts for a particular demographic are recognised, as well as the most significant beneficial impact of restoring Caldwell House, Keeper's House and the surrounding estate. Taking all the relevant matters into account, including the importance of Caldwell House as a nationally important building, it is considered on balance that the benefits of restoring Caldwell House outweigh the environmental and other impacts set out in the report, and that the proposal can be recommended for approval, contrary to the development plan policies set out and subject to conditions and a legal agreement as set out in pages 33 to 38 of the report. Further, the associated listed building application is recommended for approval, subject to conditions as set out on pages 48 and 49. Thank you, Chair.
I'd like to call yourself, Mr Bob Salter, on behalf of the agent, for 5 minutes. Okay.
Thank you, Chair. Can you hear me all right?
Yes.
My name is Bob Salter. I'm the agent for Caldwell Developments. Thank you for allowing me to make this presentation to you. Work on the proposal to save Caldwell House and its estate commenced early in 2020, and 18 months later, after doing a huge amount of studies, a comprehensive application was submitted to Council in April 21. Because this application, as you heard today, is for the restoration of Caldwell House, a Category A listed building, the most important category in Scotland, Keeper's House, a Category B listed building, and also the restoration of the heritage assets on the surrounding Caldwell estate, specific planning requirements must be met. And as has been pointed out, significant weight must be given in the decision making to saving these listed buildings. These planning requirements include demonstrating that the restored listed buildings have a permanent use and can be properly maintained into the future. Caldwell House will become 15 assisted living flats and a community hub serving the village. We need to demonstrate that the scale of enabling development is the absolute minimum required to fund the restoration costs budgeted at £15 million. This case has been presented, been examined by the Council and independently verified, demonstrating that the impacts of the enabling development are acceptable in terms of environment and heritage impacts. As the case officers mentioned, an environmental impact assessment was done, and this in-depth analysis highlighted that the site's natural and cultural assets, their impacts have been minimised. Choosing the most sustainable development option for this area, a wooded 64-hectare site in a rural location, was the most important decision that we made. Our choice had been a retirement village comprising 122 bungalows for aged over 55, 51 assisted living flats and a 60-care bed home. This was by far the most sustainable option that we could propose to help save the listed buildings. A thorough assessment has been carried out by the officers over the last 18 months, leading to this recommendation for approval. As highlighted in the committee report, and again mentioned today, determination is about the weight to be given to policy compliance in the local development plan. It's not absolute compliance with each and every policy. The newly adopted local development plan supports this type of enabling development, even in the Greenbelt. There are no objections from Historic Environment Scotland, SEPA, Nature Scot, Transport Scotland or Scottish Water. The Council Service Departments have not objected. I'd like to make the following comments about the proposal. The approval of the application creates important economic, job and community benefits for this rural part of East Renfrewshire. The amenities in the new Caldwell village will be available to all. The footpath network through the estate, as well as its on-site amenities, will be fully accessible to the neighbouring community as well as the residents on site. Ancient woodland designation is not confirmation that it's ancient woodland on the site. It starts an investigation process. We have done that, and in the loss of trees, only 6 hectares will be felled. Most of our felling is coniferous woodland, which needs felled, and we will require a felling licence from Scottish Forestry. East Renfrewshire Health and Social Care Partnership welcomes the concept of the retirement village, its integrated approach for later life living, and the quality of accessible accommodation being provided on site. A needs assessment was submitted in 2020. This demonstrated that there was ongoing demand for more care accommodation, especially for those with dementia. Dementia is not a medical condition that can be treated and supported in independent living. I know I've got a mum in a care home suffering from dementia. I note there was concerns raised over the future occupancy rates in care homes, but I would say to the committee this is a commercial matter and not a matter for planning judgment. Finally, the approval of this application saves Caldwell House for all time, and this is a real lasting legacy for all the communities in East Renfrewshire. I commend the officer's recommendation to you.
I'll now open it up for any questions to Mr. Salter. If anyone has any kind of questions they want to ask. Do it now, right.
It's not direct questions to the agent, but it was just some points I wanted to make and maybe some questions for planning, which the agent might want to come in on if they're here today, if that's okay, Chair. I'm very concerned about the application before us today. There's a couple of points I wanted to make, areas that I'm concerned. One's on the environmental impact, and ERC's policy D7 seeks to protect and enhance our natural environmental features, and she states that there should always be a presumption against development in these areas. In the representations from Scottish Forestry and Woodlands Trust, there is real concern expressed around the removal of several hectares of designated ancient forest. Now, there's a couple of times, in fact, maybe this is a point the agent might want to come in on, that saying that this isn't ancient forest, but the Scottish Forestry Commission did want to clarify that it should be noted that the woodland is designated as ancient woodland. It is not appropriate for the developer to determine otherwise to support the reasoning for deforestation. The Woodlands Trust also commented in their conclusion that ancient woods and trees are irreplaceable habitats. Once lost, they're gone forever. The Woodland Trust objects to this proposal due to the direct loss of these irreplaceable habitats, and it's something that I feel quite strongly myself. Our own report of handling states that it's considered that the proposed felling of the woodland will have an adverse environmental impact, and in particular it's considered that the loss of mature trees and replacement with a range of species will have an adverse environmental impact on the climate change objectives. Now, both myself, I proposed it, and Councillor Bathurst seconded the climate change emergency, which was declared really quite recently. And given that we did that, I cannot support this. I cannot agree with the amount of destruction and irreplaceable biodiversity that this development proposes. In addition, Policy D3, our own Greenbelt policy, states that development in the Greenbelt will be strictly controlled and limited to that which is required and appropriate for a rural location. The application before us today is actually quite a significant extent, sits far out with the principles of this policy. This is to minimise Greenbelt development. We've got 51 new build assisted living flats, 122 bungalows, 60-bed care home, and it's just far too invasive and far too damaging for the land that is currently there. I'm concerned about the sustainability of the development. This is contrary to Strategic Policy D1, as the development will not cater to the majority of residents' needs and will certainly be very reliant on private car travel, which will not encourage a sustainable transport network for residents. And the form of the development, finally. The design of this development is poorly thought out, and it's certainly not a cohesive or attractive one. Our own report handling that we have in front of us today states that it is considered that the development, apart from the areas around Caldwell House and the Keeper's Cottage, will lack a distinctive and attractive built form, and that to an extent the clusters will be separate and distinct groups of buildings linked by roads rather than immediately attractive, varied and interesting built form. For those reasons, I am deeply concerned about the planning application that we have before us today. I did have a question, and I don't know whether it's for Mr Pepler or for the agent. What guarantees are in place to ensure that Caldwell House will be fully renovated? I note that there are concerns raised over this within the report of handling, which states there is clearly some risk that a substantial number of new properties are built on site without Caldwell House being fully restored. How are these being addressed under the conditions? And to tie into that, why are absolutely no developer contributions being sought for this? It's said that the proposal is only marginally viable. If the project is so marginal, again, what guarantees are there that the full refurbishment of the house will be completed? This is, after all, and it is really the only reason that this has been recommended to us and before us today, that it is we grant planning permission. I don't know if I can get an answer on that. And also the communal facilities have been spoken about. I think the agent referred to them as a community hub for the village. But they do seem very limited, the communal facilities. They are tiny. I think that the cafe has six tables. And why are the planners disposed to grant this application with such a small number of facilities inside Caldwell House, who by the very nature of the development are expected to live remotely? It's quite concerning because I think the shop's tiny. I think there's one meeting room that will fit one meeting table, and then the cafe is big enough for six tables that's in there. So I'm a wee bit concerned about that. But turning to, and I think, Alan, I don't know if you can answer me on this, condition number 9 states that notwithstanding the plans and phasing details hereby approved and otherwise agreed in writing, construction work shall not commence on any of the bungalows within phase 1 until Caldwell House is made structurally safe. Why does it just say safe? Why does it not say wind and watertight under that phasing? Because I'm really concerned about the phasing of this development. There's simply no point making the building shell structurally secure without making it wind and watertight, because it will just erode again. So if anyone has any answers for me on those points, please.
Chair, I would be very happy to field all of these questions, and because
Can I just...
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Ireland, I'll try and pick up most of what you've said, and probably start by talking about the approach that's been taken in determining the application, because I think that provides the overview. And then I know that you have mentioned aspects of risk and viability, and obviously I'll come on to that. So the approach which has been taken in this case reflects the requirement of the legislation for us to pay special attention to the desirability of preserving the building or its setting. So that's the primary importance. It's considered that this proposal does seek to preserve or enhance that, and consequently significant weight has been given to that. So that was the starting point for this assessment. We must then consider where there is policy support and where there's not. And what the report of handling does is set out where there quite clearly is concern to the planning authority on a number of aspects. We've provided an assessment of areas that we're content with, but I've also highlighted specific areas where we do have concern, and those relate to, as you've mentioned there, environmental impacts, loss of trees, where we do have objection from Scottish Forestry, climate impact, increased traffic generation potentially, and unsustainable or isolated location. So this has been weighed up through the report of handling, and against potential health, economic and significant cultural benefits, and is deemed to be an acceptable departure from the development plan on that basis. In terms of climate change, we have included within that reference to a climate change impact assessment which was undertaken by the Council and is detailed towards the end of the report, and that concluded that the development would have moderate detrimental effect on community climate impacts. In terms of the economic justification for this, which ties into the risk aspect of it as well, we had a financial appraisal was submitted to the Council by the applicant. The Planning Authority sought separate consultancy advice on that prior to submitting it to the District Valuer. The District Valuer concluded that the development was viable, although barely, but was satisfied that it was the minimum number of units to support the restoration of the listed buildings. And it also confirmed that the applicant's costs were reasonable. But in terms of the development contributions, one of the reasons we haven't sought development contributions on an affordable housing contribution is because that would make the development unviable. And as you know, we would normally recover those, but in this particular case, it wasn't deemed reasonable. In relation to the risk aspect of it, the report of handling does acknowledge the risk, and that there are a substantial number of properties will be built without Caldwell House being fully restored. But it's also fully acknowledged that the complexity and scale and condition of the buildings on the site, and it is a unique proposal. In response to this, as we weren't fully content with this, what we have done is introduce a specific condition, which is condition 9, which seeks the stabilisation of the building. In the information that's also come in from the applicant, there is a detailed 4-phase breakdown of the restoration of the building set alongside the 5-phase construction build. And in addition to that, the application, if the application is approved, a legal agreement relating to the phasing and other matters will be concluded. So there will be as much security as we can place on this, but obviously we do fully acknowledge that there is a risk. There's a risk with any development site, but we have done what we think we can do to help to provide some security around that. I don't know if Mr. Salter... sorry, Chair.
Yes, I've got a great deal I can add. This is all about judgment on balance, and we had a very good dialogue with the Council in the approach in trying to raise the balance. For example, it's not the case that we couldn't afford to pay affordable housing, but if the Council asked for, say, commuted payments, our footprint of development would have to grow, and the more things we put into the village, like tennis courts or bowling greens or whatever else, the bigger the development becomes, the greater the impacts, the more issues. So it's about a judgment as to what is right, both in terms of financial, environmental, heritage and sustainability as well. And that's always been the core to the approach. On the woodlands themselves, you made a lot of very good points, but as always, the devil's in the detail. The ancient woodland inventory identifies where we think woodlands that have been in existence for 200 years or more exist. As part of our study, and that goes back to Roy's map of 1745, we did very detailed mapping. We understand the age of the woodlands that have been long felled and have great soil value. But the policy that Scottish Government asks us to do is, if you're going to fell trees that are in areas where there are low biodiversity value. And just to give it some facts, we are proposing to fell 23.5 hectares of woodland. 21 hectares of that is non-native conifers. They will all be replaced by broadleaf native species. There will be 6 hectares of woodland that will require to be felled to accommodate the development proposals per se. Only half of those would be broadleaf woodland, but again, those specifically don't have any local biodiversity value. And just to explain what that means, we had a landscape architect, we had a forester, an ecologist, that all looked at the ground species and the soils, and that is the minimum impact that we made. And we didn't want to go into areas where it was wholesale broadleaf woodland. So the proposal that you saw is directly shaped by the environment that we've worked in. So we've worked on minimising our impacts at all time, and the good news from a policy perspective, we can fell broadleaf woodland that's within an ancient woodland inventory area, but it must have nil or low biodiversity, and that's exactly what we've done and proved to the council. With regard to Scottish Forestry, we were very surprised at the response we got from them, and we had to seek legal opinion because we weren't very sure where they were coming from. But essentially, I think they didn't appreciate that we're only asking for planning permission to fell 6 hectares of woodland, and the balance, the 17 hectares, we will have to go, if you, the committee, decide to approve this development, we will go to Scottish Forestry and ask for a felling licence. All of that woodland is commercial forestry, wind-blown, that will be destined to be pulp for paper.
The architect in first, so I apologise for that.
No, it's all good. It's actually very helpful, Chair.
Yeah.
Thank you. Just coming back to the Caldwell House itself, the building, the cynic, I'm sure, in all of us would be that, well, they've picked an area in which can be seen to be improving a building, but the reality is maybe something quite different. And I understand where the councillor earlier on is coming from. But I have to say that anything that restores even partially a building of such significance has to be welcomed. I also do sympathise or some empathy with, in terms of the woodland itself. I wonder, can we get some clarification? A gentleman earlier on has mentioned about a felling licence. Will the Forestry Commission provide, first of all, I take it no felling can take place until a licence comes from the Forestry Commission. Maybe we can get some information on that. And secondly, if a licence is to be granted, would I be right in thinking that the Forestry Commission will go in and actually do a survey of the area just to make sure that if there are any particular trees of any particular ancient significance, then perhaps they would not get that licence and these particular trees could be secured? Because I do understand a lot of what's there is non-native, it's just grown from seed or whatever, and it's probably of no great import. So just 2 questions there really on the felling licence and whether or not the trees that maybe are ancient within that area will be maintained. Thanks. Bye.
Okay, through you, Chair. Yes, a felling licence would be required, and generally speaking, I think, I can't say for certain, but I think you're quite right. They will obviously have a site inspection prior to granting any approval. Generally, the local authority is one of a number of consultees in that type of thing. But yes, I would imagine that there would be a survey by Scottish Forestry.
Sorry, Chair, if I might just come back on that. Who has the final say then? Is it the Forestry Commission or is it Council? Thanks.
Scottish Forestry.
It's a complex position. Where you grant planning permission for development that leads to the loss of trees, whatever their nature or condition, the planning permission gives the consent to fell. With regard to all the other trees to be felled, that's 17 hectares, we will require a felling licence. We sought legal opinion on this matter, which we've copied to the Council, and we also issued to Scottish Forestry. And we believe Scottish Forestry's concerns over this proposal was for the felling of the 23 hectares being granted planning permission through the development process, and we made it very clear to them it's only the development footprint that's affected by that issue. And we welcome going back to Scottish Forestry. We have a woodland management plan which, again, we believe Scottish Forestry would embrace because it meets all their policy requirements.
Sorry, Chair. Thanks for letting me back in. So we then are giving permission to fell 6 hectares of trees, therefore, regardless of what the Forestry Commission say, they will be felled regardless. Is that correct?
That's the legal opinion.
Well, if I can just come back, just finally on the matter, if I could, I think we should have a rightful concern that perhaps there is something within these 6 hectares that has to be preserved. I just throw that open. I'm not used to this planning side of things, but I think it is a significant concern. Thanks.
It was just to come back on the points about the woodland again, and at the risk of repeating myself, and with what Councillor Wallace has just asked, it is important that Scottish Forestry did right. It should also be noted that the woodland is designated as ancient woodland. It is not appropriate for the developer to determine otherwise to support the reasoning for deforestation, and Scottish planning policy does state that ancient semi-natural woodland is an irreplaceable resource, and along with other woodlands, hedgerows and individual trees should be protected from adverse impacts resulting from development. The policy does include a presumption in favour of protecting woodland. Removal should only be permitted where it would achieve significant and clearly defined additional public benefit. Thank you.
Can I just follow on? I agree with the very last point you said that it can be done if there's clear public benefit. The reason the application is made is that the public benefit is the restoration of Caldwell Estates and its last 2 remaining nationally important building and a local building. And policy allows us to tread very carefully and the critical issue in Scottish Government guidance is the biodiversity value of the woodland area, and all our investigations confirms its low biodiversity value. And to finish, we are also required to provide compensatory planting to any woodlands that are lost, and we are doing that as well as replacing all the coniferous woodland that was planted for commercial reasons decades ago, which is now windblown. We need a felling licence to remove that, to plant it with the type of species that you would like to see and we would like to see as well, and to restore the woodland back to a beneficial value.
I can come back in, Chair. In terms of the biodiversity, I'll just join members to condition 13, which requires surveys for protected species to be undertaken within a year of the last survey. But in addition to that, if there is member concern, we could look at an extra condition which would look at the potential value of the area to be filled.
Right, okay, so Angela, you come in, I know you're remote, but if you come in now, thanks.
Thank you very much, Chair. So I've just got a couple of questions and a couple of statements, so I'll be as quick as I can. So first one is to do with the woodland as well. So what really concerns and saddens me is the total destruction, as the agent says, of 6 hectares, which is actually 15 acres of native and ancient woodland that will take place. Just think of the destruction of the biodiversity and all the natural habitats that can never be replaced. I mean, it states in their own LDP2 that the policy states that there will be a strong presumption against development on or adjacent to natural features that would compromise their overall integrity, including local biodiversity sites and ancient and long established woodland sites. I mean, that's the site. The other thing concern I had was the healthcare. I don't know if our local health services will be able to cope with all of these additional elderly residents that this site will bring. It's already nearly impossible to get for current residents to get a doctor's appointment or a dentist appointment at the minute. So I don't see how they're going to manage with this influx of elderly residents. If the question I had about that is, will our home care teams be responsible for covering these residents? As we're all aware, or we should all be aware, that our home care team is struggling at the minute. And the other thing I had was public transport. There's already, as we know, there's already an issue with public transport in Uplandmuir. So I don't know how the residents of this proposed new retirement village, which is on the furthest outskirts of our authority, are going to have access to public transport. I know that some will have their own transport, but not all. I believe that this proposal is just too far out to make it a sustainable development. And it's site traffic. What roads or routes will these very large trucks that are taking the felled timber, what roads will they use? The reason I ask is that most, if not all, of the surrounding roads are narrow back roads, with the exception of Loughleabo Road itself. I mean, how would you guarantee, or how could you guarantee that these trucks will use the appropriate roads and not just take the shortcuts down the back roads? And Caldwell House, Julie made it clear that the house is the most important part of them wanting to approve this development. But it seems to me that the house just seems to play second fiddle to all the other properties on the site. It was said that to enable the restoration of Caldwell House, they will firstly sell these bungalows in phase 1. What happens if they don't get enough of these bungalows sold? Will they still move on to phase 2 and push the restoration of the house till at some point they do eventually have enough money? That's me. Thank you very much, Chair.
I have some concerns about this development. First of all, you mentioned in the plans that there is a plan for a clinic. What sort of clinic is this? Are we talking medical clinic and medical provisions? And I'd just like to echo what Councillor Convery said. There is already a problem in that side of East Renfrewshire with members who of the public who live there trying to access healthcare facilities. They already have to travel to Neilston and Barrhead to get their medical facilities, and I have concerns that with the rise in an older population, that this need can't be met. And also, can I ask, what guarantees can you give that Caldwell House will be restored, given the rise in costs of building materials, the cost of living crisis, and how can you guarantee that all those bungalows will be sold? So, thank you. To fund the restoration of Caldwell House.
Thank you, Chair. With regard to the clinic is, we spoke to the local medical practice, and they welcomed the fact that they could have a room, basically a room where they could meet patients and discuss matters, and they welcomed the fact that that was there. So from our perspective, we think there is local medical support for that. In terms of development, whether it's this development or any other development in the council area, the issues you're raising are ones of commercial risk that any developer takes, and I don't think there are any signs in East Renfrewshire yet of house building not proceeding because of market conditions. In terms of the delivery, there's work that needs to be done to the house, and that will be done as soon as we've got planning permission, and that's to stabilise, basically capping and making sure, and we've got protected species bats that live in the walls. We've got to demolish the non-original parts of the house because there's been lots of modern additions. So stage one is to do that. At that stage, bungalows will be being built. Then the next stage is we then go and wind and watertight the whole building. We put the roof on, we put the windows in. So all, by the end of stage 2, by which time, if it's a 5-stage project, we're barely a third of the way through, and there is a wind and watertight building. The exterior of Caldwell House will be available. I should have mentioned in phase 1, Keeper's House would be fully restored as a house. So very early on, all the works, you've got all the works to the estate being done, its roads, its paths, and so on. We've then got to leave Caldwell House a year to dry out. So we've got all the water that's embedded into the structure of the building, that's got to dry out. That will only be done when we can make it on a wind and watertight basis. And only then, in stage 4, can we fit out the inside, put the assisted living flats and the community hub. Yes, the facilities there are modest, but they only need to be modest. You know, it's 180 houses and a care home. So, but it has important facilities that the wider community could come in and use. A hairdresser. These are small things, but for this location and size of village. And I would just ask you to think on that this offers the community a social interaction, their ability to do with it as they wish. So they'll make it what they wish to make it. So 6 tables would mean you've got quite a number of families. I mentioned my mum's in a care home. When I go and visit the care home, we're asked to take my mum out. Where do we go? We go to a cafe, we go for a cup of coffee and a blether, we go for a little walk, we go for a seat. That's exactly what this retirement village provides us.
Can I come back in?
And that people for Barrhead were going up to Neilson?
No, I said that people who live in Upland Moor go to medical centres in Barrhead and Neilston because of the lack of provision. That's what I said.
People from Neilson have always went to Barrhead, Julie, for the new health centre, but I believe there's a doctor up there now.
Okay.
Right, so...
can I also add...
No, there's other people to come in before you.
Councillor O'Donnell, if you want to come in.
Thank you, Chair. I've got 2 questions for the planning officers, linking to what Councillor Convery mentioned earlier. First one is around why have the concerns that have been raised by HSCP Firstly, on oversupply of care homes, and secondly, more importantly, concerns about additional potential unfunded health service costs to provide for those new residents coming into the area, not being reflected in the conditions of the approval. And the second point, which has sort of been alluded to elsewhere, the financial risk of this development not being fully completed feels quite high. How is that risk being addressed by officers in this planning approval? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor O'Donnell. In terms of the health and social care partnerships response, we obviously consulted them because of the nature of the proposal. Unfunded costs for health and social care provision and future on cost to the Council is not considered to be a material consideration. It's not a planning matter, planning related matter. And, so we haven't been able to really consider those as part of the application. We do note the comments they make in relation to immigration and further their care home provision against a backdrop of vacancy rates. And we've assessed those against other comments and objections that we have received. What I would say is that the planning service has and will be working with our colleagues in HSCP as we move forward, particularly as we develop Local Development Plan 3 and looking at the potential for establishing a policy around development contributions and the provision of physical infrastructure. That's where there can be an intervention via planning. We are quite limited where we can become involved, but that's certainly something we're working with them to consider and also to help them in terms, as we do with education, for instance, to help them in terms of future planning and how the local development plan might impact on their provision moving forward. I hope that's of some. And the second point in relation to risk, what we have done is we do recognise the risk. We have introduced an early condition 9, which requires before any works to the site commence that there would be stabilisation works to the listed structure. And also we would seek to embed phasing within a legal agreement, which would be, if the application were to be approved, we would work with our colleagues in legal services with the applicant to develop that. I hope that's of assistance.
Waiting a long time. Okay.
Thank you, Chair. You've certainly got your work cut out with you today. I'd like to raise an issue which no member has raised until now. It's the issue of sustainable transport. It's policy D8 within our local development plan. It does say within this planning application that there would be a provision of transport, but we have heard that some of the other communal facilities which are within this proposal, I think it would be safe to say they are seen as minimal. It's like what has to be provided to tick the box. So what kind of public transport provision are we actually looking at here? Is it 2 buses a day? Is it a bus every 15 minutes? Will there be any benefit to the wider community of that additional bus service? I think we need to hear a wee bit more about that. And the second point, Chair, is in the interest of balance. We do have an LTP which supports building more housing. We have a shortage of housing, not just in East Renfrewshire, but across wider Scotland. And whilst this development is specialist in nature and that it's for people of older years, I'd like to ask the Planning Department, if anyone can answer, would this free up mainstream housing and therefore deliver an indirect benefit to, for example, younger people who are looking to get on the property ladder? Would there be an indirect benefit in other communities in East Renfrewshire as a result of this development going ahead? If you can answer that issue and balance that with the public transport, that would be much appreciated.
There is very limited public transport in the Uplaw area. We consulted with Strathclyde Passenger for Transport and we were hoping that we could enter into arrangements to extend a bus service, and that would be financially supported through green travel plans. SBT said no to that. What we're doing is putting in a private bus service for a period until such time as the care home is open, and because from a subsidy point of view it would be highly unusual for a developer to put any subsidy into public transport beyond the length of their development period, because how does it get paid for thereafter? And what we are seeking to do is, at the end of that period where we have got a private bus service, is sit down with the community and their factor, because this will be clearly with all the woodland around it, it's all got to be managed, and so on. Clearly there will only be a limited adoption of the services there. So at that point there'll be a decision taken by the investment that the locals wish to put in to provide them with a service. That might be a taxi call-in service or whatever is required. We are hoping that with 80 to 100 jobs on site, that between the care home and the residents, that an attractive service can be provided to meet needs and demands.
Can I come back quickly, Chair? We need to make a decision today, and it sounds to me as if we do not have enough information that this proposal would comply with policy D8, because it sounds like it's all to be determined in the future.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Convery raised the issue of the health centre or the clinical building, whatever it is, and I noted that there was mention of one room for. Sorry, do you want me to continue? Shall I stop? Sorry, no. I noted that in his reply we were told there was one room for medical practitioners to interview possible patients. In this day and age, that would be totally inadequate for the needs of such a projected population. I mean, nowadays, elderly people don't just need the care of a doctor. They need all kinds of care assistance and various other facilities in a facility like that. And this is a building that's going to be for people of advancing years who are going to have more requirements. And I think one room set aside purely for that is just paying lip service. It's not in practical terms going to look after the needs of these people. So I'd like to hear back if there's any flexibility in this. Perhaps I would have thought it needs a full facility for a medical practice to be in there properly to be able to do this. And I'm just concerned about that. The other thing I'd like clarified from perhaps from Ms Nicholl is the situation about the trees, because I understood that a felling licence is required if we approve, and then somebody said that even if they get the felling licence, if they don't get the felling licence, the removal of the trees can still go ahead. So can that be clarified exactly what that means? Does a felling licence be required to remove these trees or not?
There's two Scottish Forestry required to give a felon licence and consider the merits of the case for all woodland out with the development footprint. This committee and this council, if it determines that the development proposal is to go ahead, all trees there is a presumption that it will be felled. I didn't think we needed to go and get a subsequent felon licence, but if there is, it's not one that Scottish Forestry would say we we are against that. Their choice, their decision is the 17 hectares of largely coniferous commercial plantation, and we're expecting that they will wish to approve it for all the climate change reasons that's been mentioned here today.
To be honest with you, Chair, I think position remains unclear in terms of whether this policy, this application would comply with policy D8. I'm not entirely sure that it has been answered in terms of what the future transportation, public transportation access would be for the residents of this development after the developer has concluded. It sounds like it's all very much to be decided later on, but we need to make a decision today. Yeah, but most care homes are. Chair, your microphone, Chair.
So there've been quite a lot I've seen down in Barrhead, on that. As far as it goes, usually some of the care homes do have their own minibus transport where they take the names and whatever and take them out, so for picking them up and taking them back. Right, so I don't know whether that's.
But Chair, I'm sure I appreciate, but Barrhead is a small town. We're looking at a very, very rural proposal in this case, where there are very few other transportation options compared to where most care homes are located.
But Barrhead will be the nearest place they can come to shop, you know, for anything for the thing with, so it will be, you know. Okay, I'm sorry, Councillor Bamford, I do apologise. You've had your hand up for ages, and I'll ask you to come in now.
Thank you very much, Chair. And a lot of the things I would have raised concerns about or asked questions about have already been asked. However, as the agent mentioned, this is a balance between, or a judgment, whatever you want to call it, between the fact that it's against the local development plan, and so is it within the public interest, which I believe is one of the reasons you can go against the local development plan, and this enabling development. As far as I can see, this enabling development is only enabling the developers. It may enable the few people that live or eventually live in Caldwell House if it eventually gets built, bearing in mind that we've heard that there are strong possibilities that it may never get built. But I think it's actually against the public interest, this, because I know we can't talk, and Julie mentioned about not talking about the costs of the HSCP, but others have raised concerns about the HSCP, and I'm not talking about costs, I'm talking about as a few of the councillors have mentioned, the strain on the HSCP and the over-provision. Now, I don't know if the agent or developers are aware, we've already got planning permission went through several years ago for a similar development in Newton Mearns up at the old dye works. So that has already been approved, as has a care home facility in Drumbay. And there are a few which we can't take into account that are coming up ahead, like Greenbank, ignoring the ones that haven't come up yet. The ones that have actually been passed and been approved for planning permission are going to really cause an over-provision in the area, and it's considered it will be over a 33% increase in independent sector provision. Now, we know, or most of us will know who have been in the council, and those who are new to council will know that we had at least 2 care homes closed within the last few years, and that put a huge strain on the HSCP and social work staff to relocate these residents. That's a huge risk, and I understand that's a commercial decision, as you mentioned. However, it's also we have a responsibility for the residents here in terms of what could happen if we've got a massive over-provision, as well as Councillor Pragnell mentioned about the HSCP. I mean, getting carers just now, and I too have a mother who has dementia. I think we all have. It's so prevalent just now. We all know people who are in that same situation, but this is not going to solve that problem. I don't think, because we're putting more strain on a system that's already strained. In terms of Uplandmoor itself, do you know, I think it was Councillor Morrison that mentioned about transport. We know the issues about transport, and Councillor Erlin will know that with an area like Eaglesham, where we are councillors. Uplemere is even more isolated. In fact, the NHS pulled out of Caldwell House because of its isolated location. I can't see any benefits to the people of Uplemere, and I cannot see any benefits to the people of East Renfrewshire in this proposal, apart from the restoration of Caldwell House, which I don't think is sufficient for us to overcome the LDP by saying it's in the wider public interest. There was a few other things. I mean, there's things like, I'm not going to go over all the trees because I think we've discussed that fully. There's questions around flooding, adverse hydrological issues from the new hard standing areas. Now, given that we are aware of the issues that we're having just now around global warming, I think we have to be very aware that that is actually mentioned in the report. You may shake your head, but it is something that has been mentioned. I am concerned that it's marginal, the costings. So, as I think it was Councillor Pragnell mentioned, the costings. How do we know? Well, we do know that the costings of restoration of Caldwell House is going to increase substantially. How are you going to be able to fund that? Even if you sell all the bungalows and all the other properties, how do we know that that is going to be sufficient? And I'm also quite shocked at the fact that there are no developer contributions. Surely that would be the one main thing that you could say was in. So the public interest isn't going to be served at all by this. I can't understand why we're not allowing, are not insisting on any developer contributions apart from the restoration of Caldwell House, of which we have no guarantees other than the fact that they may stabilise it, and you're not even guaranteeing to make it wind and watertight. So I don't know how many questions were in there or just comments, but I am not. I'm not happy with this proposal at all. Thank you, Chair.
I understand the points that you're making. So flooding and the hydrology of the site and the fluvial and the pluvial issues, these have all been addressed. There will be no flooding issues when the development goes ahead. Why? Because we've got sustainable urban drainage systems to put into place that will, with the exception of areas that will be allowed to continue to be wet, because Scottish Water would like that to continue. So the issues that you're raising, you're right to raise them, but they've all been addressed and they are not an issue going forward. When the district valuer made comment on the margin of the viability of the proposal, we were looking at a profit margin of 15%. That 15%, if this was being done by some other commercial, this has been done by local developers. If it was being done by other commercial developments, their hurdle rates of return would be much higher. So it's only a marginal issue that is below a particular type of PLC developer. You've mentioned some care homes are not going ahead. That's because they're predetermined by a 200 flatted development. You can't sell a flat unless you've built the block. That's in my opinion, I would suggest to you, it's a funding issue. We have got financial investors that have stood by this development and its long journey, its long financial journey to get here today. So in terms of credibility of whether it's going to be delivered, my clients wouldn't have me here today if they weren't going to deliver this, because it's all about the delivery of Caldwell House. No Caldwell House delivered, no retirement village.
Councillor Buchanan, do you want to come in?
Thanks, Eamon. I wasn't sure if it was my turn there yet. I know there's a number of other hands up. I think a lot of the comments that I have already been made, and I think it's fair to say that I don't think that there has been answers really fully given. I think what we have is a proposal that is a significant departure from the local development plan, and the expectation, I think certainly my expectation of that would be that there are therefore significant benefit. If we were to take a decision to depart from that plan, that there would need to be significant benefits for East Renfrewshire and the people of East Renfrewshire, and I haven't seen that addressed in this plan. We talk of, we've went through, I think, some of the environmental issues, we've touched on the transport issues, and none of them have really been given what I feel is a reasonable answer. But we also look at the restoration of Caldwell House, which may well be a benefit, but that restoration is dependent not only on the sale of properties, but on the success of a care home. A care home which may find that it sits empty because, as has been highlighted, we already have an overcapacity, we've already had failed care homes in the area, and we have the potential of a national care service which may well look at how social care is dealt with. We already look to ensure that most people are looked after in their own homes, and although people in this area would be in their own homes, it doesn't strike me that what we're creating, or what is the developers are creating, is a retirement village. It seems more like a housing estate for those over the age of 55, because I don't think the benefits of a village are actually included within this proposal. And that's a significant problem, especially in an area which already has a difficulty. It's already semi-rural. People who have lived there, some families for a long, long time in the area, but there's not a lot of amenities in the immediate area. And if you're not factoring in significant transport issues, if you're not putting in, then that all adds a burden to already busy areas, if you like. And so I see that as a particular problem going forward. As has been highlighted, it's done in various phases, and I don't think that the success of that has really been categorised or quantified, because everything is dependent on the next stage, which I certainly feel has not been addressed yet. The issues around Caldwell House have not been addressed, and I think it would put an undue burden on many of our healthcare services in the area, which we know are currently under significant pressure. Thank you.
Yeah, just briefly, Chair. Recently, as you know, you wonder why I'm bringing this up, but it will become clear very shortly. In Thornley Bank, for example, we've got a bid going in there to try and get funds. And when we're doing some historical background there, you'll find that there was an entire industrial village was razed to the ground many years ago, beginning of 19th century, in fact, actually around about 1950 or so, completely razed to the ground. And one of the sort of stately homes in Rooken Glen was razed to the ground because it was becoming just in a state of disrepair. And when I'm looking back at this, I'm thinking, what on earth were these people thinking of? And yet here I am actually sitting here as a councillor with an opportunity to actually make a decision that would actually restore or at least reduce the likelihood of a very important building going to rack and ruin. And I think my feeling is that maybe there's a number of people here that aren't particularly interested in architecture, etc., and the significance of that in our culture. But I certainly am, and I do feel that I do recognise this 6 hectares that we're going to lose here, and we're trying to get a balance for the public benefit. My personal feeling is that the public benefit is there. If there's an opportunity to at least stop this building it's just going to crumble away. If we've got a chance here, and I do believe we do have a good chance of restoring this building and maybe in the longer term actually bring it up back into full use, I think we should, as councillors, take our responsibility and try and hold on to that piece of culture that we have. That's my personal feeling. Thank you.
The architect, but have the Robert Adam was the architect of the structure, right, as far as it goes for there, and I know Historic Scotland were quite impressed by that, as they have. I think we're the only place that has that within, a lot of Scotland, right, as far as it goes. No answer. Wait, we've only got...
It was one of the things I just wanted to clarify in relation to the development contributions. We had, in terms of the viability of the proposal, we took our own advice on that and also put the costs to the district valuer. And the response we had there was that to claim DCs would make the development unviable, and also to require affordable housing would be unreasonable. So that there was a specific reason why we didn't choose to do so. We have to take everything that we have in front of us, consider it, take advice where required, and make a judgment based on that. So that was specifically why we didn't take contributions for affordable housing or development contributions. In relation to, I know Historic Environment Scotland are on the call today. They're joining remotely. Louisa Hum is I think still on the call. I mean, in terms of the public interest and what this would deliver, it's the retention of a significant cultural asset, and you'll see from the way the reports of handling have been structured that has been put to the front of the discussion. It's a nationally significant building, A-listed building by Robert Adam, and he is himself an internationally significant architect. So in terms of the discussions that we're having today, and I did say at the very beginning about this being a very unique application and not something that would come before a planning applications committee very often, the rationale for the report is underpinned by that, as well as that cultural benefit in terms of the public interest, which Councillor Bamforth has referred to. There is provision of a well-designed site with opportunity for active travel, recreational walking for residents and also for the wider public as well. And from that as well, an economic benefit in terms of the construction industry, but also in terms of future tourism, etc. So that was all really I just wanted to clarify after the points raised, Chair.
Thank you, Chair. I think, having listened to everybody, there is huge environmental impacts in this development, but there's obviously huge architectural implications on this as well. And have an interest in both. It's difficult to balance the two of them out. I think what we should, in my opinion, the 6 hectares that there's legally to do, I think there should be a condition put in that they are surveyed, so that all trees are surveyed, and that gives that out the way, so that then there is no kind of grey area in there as well, just to try and make sure. I think safeguarding Caldwell House is of huge importance as well, as Councillor Wallace says, and I think I've looked at the conditions on it, and Councillor Convery mentioned this earlier on about the transport going there. I think there should be a condition added in where transport can and cannot go, because this has happened time and time again. Obviously, I stay in Eaglesham. When they were building the wind farm, the lorries weren't meant to go through the village, but they did. There was a condition put in that, and it stopped it. So I think there should be something put in that, if that's just one of the conditions. And I do think the public transport aspect of it needs firmed up completely. Thank you.
It's very brief. I noticed that the representative did not. Sorry, the of the one room for clinical use in that building has not been addressed by that representative there. I'm sorry, I forgot your name, sir. I hear what his attitude to that is, and if we could put a condition in that there should be adequate space there for health and social care to be adequately represented there for the people living there. So there could be a medical facility and a social care facility for those who need such a thing. I'd like to hear Ms Nichols' comments on that also, because it doesn't seem to have been addressed, and nobody's addressed my question before.
Councillor MacDonald, do you want to come in?
Yes, thank you. I just want to thank all my colleagues for their really valuable contributions that we've heard, particularly Councillor Ireland, who made a very impassioned case for the biodiversity aspect of this. I don't think I could have probably worded it better myself, to be honest with you. I have significant concerns about, a number of different issues surrounding the environmental impact of the amount of hectares of land that we're talking about and the deforestation. And obviously I was one of the councillors that supported her in her motion a few months ago with Councillor Bamforth, and I would find it difficult to be in favour to approve this application on that basis. Obviously it's a hard balance to strike, isn't it? We've got here a case, as Councillor Wallace has stated, that we have a building of significant architectural significance here in terms of an ability to have it refurbished and brought back, to bring it back to full glory, but at the same time there's the adverse impact of the environment, and then also the transportation issues as well, which are significant. I do agree with Councillor Buchanan that these very, very significant issues have not really fully been addressed. I would have liked, it's a shame that Julie Murray isn't here today, because I was under the impression, and I'm somewhat surprised because the position of the recommendations that come before us today are somewhat diametric to what I would believe the HSCP's position on this would be in terms of care home saturation within East Renfrewshire, and the fact that the favoured option from an HSCP standpoint is to try at all costs to try to care for people within their own homes so that they can continue to live independently. It somewhat seems surprising to me that the recommendations are being made on the basis that I think HSCP would be of the opinion that adding in another care home into an area that's already quite saturated would work detrimentally against the work that HACP does. Maybe I'm wrong in that, but that's certainly the understanding that I got from conversations I've had previously. So yes, thank you colleagues for your contributions. It's helped me in this very important decision going forward. I'm yet to hear more of your contributions, but thank you.
Yeah. Margaret Phelps for the CHCP now. Okay.
Thank you very much, Chair. Just to introduce myself to the meeting, I'm Margaret Phelps. I'm one of the senior managers working alongside Julie Murray within the Health and Social Care Partnership. So here to represent them today and to thank members for their contributions already that have represented the views of the Health and Social Care Partnership. But just to confirm, what we've identified is a number of areas that have already been touched on. The impact on the GP services, and just for clarity, our GP services, we work very closely with them, but they are independently contracted, so they can contract themselves to support new developments. And what that means for us within a Health and Social Care Partnership is that GP services will be delivered, but they are a gateway to some of our own services. So they will mean that we will be, without necessarily having that control, we will be delivering additional services such as district nurses. In terms of clarity, this proposal is focused on a self-funding model, so it may have impact for us should that not be sustainable, and so it won't immediately have impact in terms of our own home care provision because it's likely to be private provision. In relation to further care home, within the application referred primarily to a care home provision within North Ayrshire. As members know, we have 12 care homes. One is our own care home, 11 are in the independent sector. We already have under capacity. We do have sustainability issues in terms of recently a couple of care homes have closed. With the additional development, we've assessed, as Councillor Bamforth mentioned earlier, that there could be an increase of 33% because there is already 118. And for us, that's about sustainability of the sector. It's about us supporting the sector with health and social care. But it's also about retention and recruitment of social care staff because we know that is a challenge at this point in time. So those are the main areas that Health and Social Care have identified that will impact both on our partner providers within care homes in our own area, but also about the GP services and our associated services. So it's just to let you know that we are here if people need any other additional questions.
See?
No, I was just trying to understand. What is she for this or against
I don't
it?
know.
Or, yeah.
Even I'm confused.
Okay, thanks.
Right, and that's it.
It sounded to me like she was for it.
Well, I thought that as well, then I went, don't think so. I don't know. Then I came to the conclusion, I think she was. But I think if I could just kind of, from my perspective, have a look right round the council, I think maybe we should go for a site visit. And then the trees will be a thing, the big building will be a thing, mark out where the things go, and take whatever housing is there, because I think the day we're going round in circles and it just seems to be a few things. So rather than have any vote of any kind, why do we not just all go there, and if there's only 6 seats for a cafe, right, let's add more, right, and just go out there. Take a flask and sit down and see what we can do. If I can get finished speaking, Chair. Right, so, you know, it's no real as far as it goes, right? So, what do you think? Is there MD otherwise minded? I thought that. Right. Is that everybody else vote yes?
Chair, can I gently suggest that usually the site visit takes place before the discussion?
I know. We're going to just put the horse before the cart, right, and that's it. We're doing it the other way round.
I'm not sure what the protocol is.
You haven't got it,
I'm a new member, so...
I'm not voting, Chair. I'm just asking if you're having a site visit, would you consider inviting the current residents to that site visit, please?
Current residents, I put the whole Applemore? You're staying caught about, okay. Well, there's no. Right, okay, you can see people there.
Chair, sorry to interrupt, Chair. I think Mrs McIntyre will be able to advise what the process would be if a site visit was agreed by the committee today.
Yeah, Chair, just to clarify, members of the public are able to attend the site visit, just in an observational capacity, to observe the members on the site. Residents are able to attend the site visit in an observational capacity, but can I ask that no other questions are taken from the members of the public? It's meant to be, and you're meant to be observing the meeting. Thank you.
So you're not approving it. You're not voting.
No, I feel that we've had a really full and really good discussion today, and I don't feel that there's a need for a site visit. I think that we could move to a vote. We have actually had a really good, full discussion.
We've had a discussion of sorts, right?
Can I commend your suggestion, Chair? Because although we've had a good discussion, there's been some conflicting and somewhat, certainly from the health and social care side of it, confusing evidence, and I think your suggestion is very apposite.
I think it's to me it's confusion just of what's all coming through, right, as far as it goes, for, against, whatever. I really don't care. But I think if we went and we had a look at the site, we had a look at, you know, the building, we have a look at the different areas of where it is, right, I think we could have a more informed thing for ourselves. Does MD, right, so I'm going to move. What do you get hung up for? Right, Eve, is it, I'm moving to the vote.
I think that the lack of clarity actually gives us enough information to make a decision on it.
Chair, do you mind? I'll come in. The chair has put forward a proposal to the committee, seconded by Councillor Edlin, that the application be continued for a site visit. Is there an amendment to that motion? Councillor Ireland.
I would amend that and say that we take a decision today, because that's what we're here to do.
If you're asking for a decision to be taken, Councillor Ireland, are you moving a grant or a refusal for the application?
I'm moving against the decision to go on a site visit, but I would also move against granting this application.
And do you have a seconder for that amendment, Councillor Bamforth?
Can't do that. It's a moved a thing for to go on a site visit. I want a show of hands for people who want to go on a site visit. No, there is. Right, okay. Right, so, right, just you take that because I'm ready for exploding.
Okay, so I'm just going to take a vote on that. So we have before us the motion put forward by the Chair, which was seconded by Councillor Edland for a proposed site visit prior to determination, and Councillor Ireland, seconded by Councillor Bamforth, has put forward that we move to decision today, and that decision is to refuse the application. Councillor Ireland, do you have some policy reasons that you'd like to put behind that refusal just now while we're putting it forward?
Yes.
Yeah.
Do you want me to state them just now?
If you've got them just now, and then that means
Point of order. Point of order, Chairman. Miss Councillor Ireland's already made her, in her first statement, gave her reasons for refusing. So why are we going through this again?
I think it's just to make sure that we list out the policy reasons.
Yeah. Just for clarity for members, so I noted down some of Councillor Ireland's reasons, which is against policy D3, D7 and D1, if that's appropriate. And against the local development plan as well.
If you're happy with me running through them.
Yeah.
The policies that I see that it's against is the Scottish planning policy with specific reference to the reference to woodland, and that it states that ancient semi-natural woodland is irreplaceable, so I would say it's against that policy. With regard to our own policies, it's against policy D3, greenbelt, countryside around towns, policy D7, natural environment features, policy D8, sustainable transport networks, and our strategic development plan, strategic policy 1 in particular. I feel there's been a lot of talk about balance, but taking those into balance and the breaches of policy, together with the devastating impact of the development, quite simply outweighs the enabling development, is put before us today, and I would vote to refuse the planning application.
Thank you, Councillor Ireland. Okay, if I just go through and call the...
Sorry, point of order, Chair. Can I just interject something here? Just to be clear, are we taking a vote right now? It seems like we're deciding in this application. I suggest we keep things clean and tidy in terms of the minutes of this meeting. To take a vote, first of all, to decide whether we are going to have a site visit or not. And then once that vote has been taken, then either on the result of that vote, either suspend and wait for the site visit to take place, depending on the outcome of that vote, or continue onward with the meeting and decide on the application. This is all getting a wee bit kind of intermingled for my liking personally.
What we're putting forward just now is based on the two proposals that were put in front of us. If there's another amendment, which is to then decide not to have a site visit and to make a decision, then that could be a third amendment, and then we can take all the three amendments and vote them off each other. But I was just moving on the basis of the two amendments.
Point of order, does the Chair have any prerogative in this matter?
The Chair has a overriding vote if it comes to a mutual decision, but that's that.
But I mean, this is. I would have thought it was logical that one thing predominates over the other, and by having what was, I think, I've forgotten your name, sorry, the councillor over there said that there was confusing data, and then we're refusing to have a site visit because it's confusing. We should vote because it's confusing. I think that's illogical.
Chair, I'll maybe try and separate out the two separate issues. So what we will do in the first instance is we will deal with the question of whether or not there should be a site visit. So initially, the Chair, seconded by Councillor Edlin, has moved that we have a site visit. So initially, your counter proposal to that, Councillor Ireland, was that we don't have a site visit. So if we put aside moving on to whether or not that the application is granted or refused, we will deal solely in the first instance with whether or not we should have a site visit. So do you have a seconder for your amendment that we do not go on a site visit and that we just continue to determine the application? Councillor Bamforth? Yes, okay, thank you. So on that basis, we are voting now simply to decide whether or not to go on a site visit, first of all.
Okay, I'll just do the roll call because I think that's the easiest way to work through it. So Councillor Cunningham is for the motion. Councillor Bamforth is for the amendment. Councillor Buchanan?
Amendment.
Councillor Campbell?
Motion.
Councillor Convery?
Amendment.
Councillor Edlin?
Motion.
Councillor Ireland is for the amendment.
Amendment.
Councillor Lundy?
Amendment.
Councillor MacDonald?
Amendment.
Councillor McLean?
Motion.
Councillor Merrick?
Amendment.
Councillor Morrison?
Motion.
Councillor O'Donnell?
Motion.
Councillor Pragnell?
Motion.
Councillor Wallace?
Motion.
Okay, so we have 8 for the motion at 7 for the amendment, which means that we're deciding to have a site visit and postpone the determination for the decision until after we've had a site visit.
Chair, may I ask a question, please?
Why is this time?
Chair, now, I am a member of the Planning Committee, and for the benefit of other members here who are not, we go on site visits for relatively smaller matters. May I inquire as to why there was not a site visit scheduled in the first place, given the gravity of this application? Fair enough, Chair.
We need the microphones on. I can't hear what's been said.
It's not my microphone. Right, what is it?
Thank you very much, Chair. It was just a point, when we go on the site visits for the local review body, we are on our own, and I think that that procedure should be followed, and we should not be going round with the agent or the developer. I think that this is a site visit. We should maybe follow the protocol as we...
I've only asked if we were going on a site visit. I haven't even included the agent or the developer.
Again, no mic.
It's talking.
No, thank you very much. So it'll just be us going round on the site visit, and we won't be accompanied
No,
with the...
that's fine.
Thank you very much.
Chair, can I just, again, for clarification, the procedure in relation to site visits for these planning applications is different from the procedure that's followed for local review bodies. Mrs McIntyre will be able to explain what the differences are, so I'm going to go ahead.
It's actually the same process. So for the local review body, the agent and the applicant, they can come and witness what's going on at the site visit. I think just when we've done in the past, they haven't been present, Councillor Ireland. Yeah.
Apologies for my misunderstanding there. I thought because that hadn't happened in the past there was a difference, but the process is actually the same, so sorry about that.
Sorry?
Sorry, Chair, just for clarity then, in terms of, we could be accompanied by, I mean, this does give us additional information if we wish to ask, rather than come away from that site visit still no idea what's going on. I personally think it would be helpful to have these people there, as well as residents as well. Thank you.
But what is it you're saying, Councillor Ireland, that no SNP are going to be attending?
Oh, no.
It's
the fact that we never have any outside influence when we go on a site visit.
I know that.
Previously,
right.
So it's just to ensure that we don't have outside influence on this site visit. But if we do...
There's rules that go along with it, and I think I said to you what they are. Right? Okay? So, right. So we're taking it as a full council that's here are going to a site visit. Yeah? Yeah? Oh. Oh, right.
Chair, if I could just advise the committee as well that as it's been agreed now that there will be a site visit in relation to the planning application, We will also just continue consideration of the listed building consent application that was in front of you today and deal with both at the same time when we come back following the site visit.
Can I clarify with someone, if I understand 18 of us might not all be able to make it on the same date. If anyone cannot make the site visit, does that mean they're precluded from a vote when it comes back, or can they still vote?
That's correct. Councillor Bamforth, you need to be present at the site visit to then take part in the determination.
So does that mean you might offer more than one site visit? Because I understand there are some people here who have... Well, there are folk here, I know who have other jobs who perhaps can't make a particular day. I'm fine, but I know there are members who have other employment, so they may not be able to make it. So I know it's quite difficult to get 18 people to agree to a specific date and time. So I just wonder how we will overcome that in order that all 18 of us get to vote.
Point of order.
Sorry, can I just confirm, Councillor Bamforth, all members need to be present at the same site visit, so to ensure that everybody receives the same information. So it will need to be one site visit, and we can obviously accommodate going out with meeting dates to see that everybody can attend that needs to attend.
Point of order. Can I just say that I'm on the planning committee, and I would say that the last time we had a visit, there was one member who could not attend the site visit, and he was obviously precluded from voting at the consideration thereafter. And if after proper searches for a date that suits as many people as possible, if somebody can't manage because of whatever reason, that is not the committee's problem, it's the person concerned's problem.
Can I comment on that? I don't usually stand on the planning committee, but if I had known that, I probably wouldn't have voted the way I had. I should have been clearer that
Chair, through you, the provisions for site visits and whether or not it then precludes people from taking part in a subsequent meeting are set out in the Council's standing orders. It's unfortunate that maybe wasn't made clear to Councillor Pragnell beforehand, but the information is there. Standing orders are available for members. And we will make every attempt, as has already been indicated, to try and accommodate all of the members of the committee who are here today. But as Mrs McIntyre has already said, in the event for any reason someone is not able to attend the site visit, they would then be precluded from taking part in considering the application when we come back.
Yes.
Chair, Councillor MacDonald wants to say something further if you're prepared to indulge him or if you're happy to finish it.
That's it for the day, right? As far as I'm concerned, that's it for the day. I'm about the
Chair, your microphone.
Yeah.
Councillor MacDonald, just to let you, the Provost, she's not going to let you come in the meeting. She's considering that the meeting has now been concluded. Thank you.
Finished. No.